What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, a console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about our favorite hobby, video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 55. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. It's kind of been a slower week. I feel like in the world of gaming news, though, some interesting things kind of did trickle out. And in terms of like my personal life and how things are going, I'd say it's going pretty good. Pretty well. We got some snow here over last weekend. And, luckily the family didn't have to go anywhere, so we could just hang out. I got to take my son out, play in the snow a little bit. So it was good. It was nice. And we had it for, I don't know, we probably got like 8 inches, which is like nothing compared to some of you out there. But for us, it was a good amount and lots of ice. There was quite a bit of ice too, because it was like well below freezing for like 3 days. So yeah, again, luckily we didn't have to go anywhere, so we got to kind of just enjoy it. But I have to say, after about like 3 days of that, I was like, nah, I'm good. I'm ready to move on. I mean, I'm so ready for spring. I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready for warmer weather. I'm ready to wear shorts, get that vitamin D, sunshine, of course, get out and golf in the sunshine. So I'm ready for it. I'm kind of over the snow. I'm certainly over the rain that we get, which is constant in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm just ready. And plus, coming up in just, I think, like 2 weeks from when this goes live, give or take, 2 weeks, March Madness, which I'm always a fan of. It's so fun to watch, like those first few days where there's literally, from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, it is college basketball, game after game after game. Like there's like 4 games going on all at once. It's just pure madness. And there's so many, it's so fun to see like the upsets and all that stuff. I'm excited. I don't really pay attention to college basketball until March Madness, like many people. So, but it's always such an exciting time. And then around that is, college baseball, MLB. So I'm certainly looking forward to that. Just getting back into the sunshine season, sunshine sports is going to be great. It's going to be great. Now, I noticed something funny. If you guys tuned into last week's episode, we talked about, the state of play, and I titled it, related to Suicide Squad. And I was actually going through my podcast episodes because in one of my earlier episodes notes, I had wrote down some idea, actually the topic we're going to talk about today. We'll get to that here shortly. And I wanted to make sure, I was like, I'm pretty sure we didn't already talk about this. So I was looking through my old previous episodes of the podcast and I found something just so funny. So episode 49, I titled it, "Is the new Suicide Squad game destined to fail?" And I think we'd gotten a look at the game. I think what that was is we got the leaked screenshot that was showing off a lot of the live service elements. So that's what I named it. And then last episode, I said Suicide Squad is destined to fail. So you can tell I'm super creative with my podcast titles, episode titles. So that's great. I thought that was absolutely hilarious that I did that. And you know what though? It kind of works out because hear me out. It works out because one of the premises of this podcast is for me to chronicle my time with video games, whether it be reacting to news, talking about games that I'm playing. It's an outlet for me to talk about it. And it also kind of encapsulates a period and moment in time within gaming from my perspective. And these 2 episodes, albeit, what are they, 5-6 weeks apart, I think chronicles the way I've viewed Suicide Squad over that period of time. Because when you saw the rumors of the live service with the obviously real screenshot, but it was leaked, you kind of got to ask yourself, is this not good? Like, is this good? Is it not good? And then once we saw the extended look at the latest state of play, got to see some gameplay. Again, I'm not interested in that game. It doesn't look very exciting or appealing to me. It looks very generic. So I feel like it's not going to do that well. I mean, I put that out there. So I think that's a fair assessment of my poor titling. But I just thought that was really funny because I caught that and I was like, man, that is hilarious. So anyways, also, one of the things I want to say too right at the top here is I know there's a lot of new people tuning into the show, people downloading the show, checking it out, and I appreciate that. I want to say welcome to the show. Hopefully you guys get some enjoyment out of it, enjoy some of the topics that we talk about here on this podcast. And I want to say thank you guys for your love, kindness, and support. It's been awesome here in the last, I don't know, several weeks. Like, I feel like we're finally getting some consistent viewership, some consistent numbers, and that's super exciting. So I really do appreciate that. And again, if you have any feedback, please write into the show. You can hit me up on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast, leave some comments on YouTube, what have you. Write in. I'm always open to hearing your criticisms or questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, ideas, any of it. I'd love to hear from you guys. But I wanted to say thank you for that. Another thing I got to say at the top here is, as with every week, there's always this constant flow of news with the Xbox Activision deal. And now that I think the CMA has had some hearing, I think the EU is making some movements, same with the FTC here in the States, and some interesting tidbits are coming out, including, I saw there was an article that I think it just got posted today, at least time of recording. I'm recording on a Thursday evening. This podcast will go up the following Monday. And basically the article stated that they expect EU to approve the deal. And so it seems like things are kind of looking up in Microsoft's favor, which is really, really interesting, given that, I mean, like last week, it seemed like things weren't looking good. So very, very interesting at that. We'll see if it actually comes true. It is just a rumor. The other thing I saw kind of floating out there that probably warrants a deep dive in and of itself once this information finally comes to surface. But basically, I think in the FTC trial, Microsoft subpoenaed PlayStation for all of their third-party exclusive deals from 2019 onwards. And Sony, I think, appealed that, and it was denied by the FTC. So I think in some form or another, PlayStation is going to have to share that information with Microsoft, which is pretty wild if you think about it, because that's pretty confidential stuff. And it's through today. So you imagine there's probably some exclusivity deals in there that we don't even know about. Like, those games aren't even announced yet. So it's going to be really interesting once that stuff starts to surface and we can kind of nitpick it. So kind of, it's a really interesting time over there. Again, I'm exhausted on this topic, as I'm sure a lot of people are. But I did see one tweet, I'm going to pull it up here on my phone, that I kind of wanted to take a moment to respond to here at the top. Let me pull it up here. 1 second. You'd think I'd be more prepared to have this on the show, but I'm not. Okay, here it is. So this person basically tweeted out 5 reasons why they support the Activision Blizzard deal. And I feel like the reason why I wanted to touch on this is because I feel like it encapsulates I think a lot of feelings from proponents of this deal, as well as a lot of, I guess you call them the Xbox fanboys, Xbox influencers, so on and so forth. So I want to read these and then someone's response to it, but I also want to respond to it as well and take a moment. Again, at the top of this podcast. So let's start with number 1. They say the developers want to be acquired. And now I got to say, I haven't seen any outspoken devs over at Activision Blizzard that say they want this deal to go through. Again, maybe I've just missed that, but I think it's more that the executives and the likes of Bobby Kotick, the CEO, they want to be acquired. So it's all the upper management. They're the ones that want to be acquired. And I find this interesting because it's like, Has anyone asked why they want to be acquired? Has anyone thought about that? Like, what could be the reason they want to be acquired? Activision Blizzard is one of the largest publishers within the industry. They own the most popular IP in all of video games and Call of Duty that is very successful. It's a top-selling game every single year. I don't think they're necessarily hurting for money, albeit they've had some bumps along the road on the Blizzard side, I would say. So why? And I feel like a lot of people here have like short-term memory loss. I'm old enough to remember when there was a lot of heat over at Activision Blizzard because of all of the sexual impropriety allegations, poor work conditions, lots of allegations coming out from Activision Blizzard employees. And a lot of the media journo types were basically pitchforks in the air criticizing this, trying to stick up for the employees and over these allegations and really wanting someone's head on a stake, so to speak, regarding the situation. Yet those same people clap like seals at this deal going through, as if this is going to be some saving grace for all the employees. Does anyone find that a little odd? I mean, I know I do. I find it very odd that all the uppities, especially Bobby Kotick, wants out, given all these allegations. And my theory is that this gives him an out. If this deal goes through, it gives him an out, puts the liability on Microsoft. Him and a bunch of other people get fat paydays. I mean, we're talking Microsoft's overpaying, I believe, what Activision Blizzard is actually worth. They're overpaying market value for that to ensure that the deal would go through, and they could get them to bite on that. So you own stock in Activision, you're gonna get paid a lot of money, like Bobby Kotick. So is that not? I mean, these people that wanted to see Bobby Kotick burn criticized him for all the things, him running the company, has been now given a handout, basically for lack of a better term, get out of jail free card. Now, I don't know if these allegations will continue to follow him or what legal recourse could happen if any of that stuff's proven true, but a get out of jail free card, so to speak, from Xbox, to where he's going to walk away with a fat payday. I think he still said he'd run Activision, but now it's all under Microsoft. He's got a shield now. Just, hello? I mean, is that not something that we want? I mean, that's what we want? I don't understand here. And again, no one's asking the question why they want to be bought. I just find that really interesting. And again, it's the same people that clap like seals and praise this deal, but also at the same time get their pitchforks ready to storm Activision Blizzard over these allegations. And again, allegations, innocent until proven guilty here in the US. Keep that in mind. It's just wild to me. And the other thing about this too, if I can I guess I'll get on my soapbox for a minute here. I never have understood how people can just praise and support blindly these mega corporations and clap like seals and praise the consolidation of the gaming industry like this. I don't understand it, because here's the thing. These companies don't care about you. They just want your money. These aren't moralistic figures that have good virtues and all of that stuff, no matter whatever marketing campaign they're trying to run or political stance that they take that you may or may not agree with. They don't care. They just want your money. And I don't know. I mean, call me whatever you want, but sue me for being a little skeptical about a multi-trillion-dollar corporation absorbing a other mega corporation publisher. Is that a thing? I don't know. It just seems weird to me. I don't understand the cheerleading around it. I am very weary of these because I don't like this consolidation. I don't like this potential monopolization, so on and so forth. But just wanted to put that out there. Now, number 2, they say this furthers the cause of organized American labor. And this one I partially agree with, and because I think what he's referring to is, I think when the Bethesda deal went through, there were a group of devs, I want to say QA testers, if I remember specifically, that formed one of the first unions under Microsoft within the gaming industry. So they organized labor. And I think the thought process here is that if this deal goes through, then the developers under Activision Blizzard can also either join the union or form a different union to have some sort of organized labor now under Xbox and Microsoft. And I'm not going to pretend to fully understand unions or the pros and cons of them. My kind of stance on unions, at least from some of the stuff I heard, is more of a negative thing. And from my perspective, I'm more of an advocate from an individual standpoint rather than the collective. And unions tend to be collective organizations that you get elected officials that speak for everyone and all that stuff. And I just, the idea of that really just doesn't sit well with me, though I do understand it has its place, and in some instances can be a great benefit to their workforce. But generally speaking, don't like the idea of it. However, with this, I do see the point. However, I would ask this: what's preventing them from doing that now? And this is an honest question. I don't know. Maybe it's because Activision won't let them do it. I don't know how that particularly works per se. I haven't looked into it in too detail. So I'll concede to this point. But again, my question stands. Like, can they not do that now? Is the only way they'd be able to do this is by being bought by Microsoft and Xbox? I don't know. But that's the question I posed to that in response to that one. Number 3, more titles will be brought to more platforms. And I think this one is referencing the recent deals that Xbox struck with Nintendo, and I think it's Nvidia, like 10-year deals. Same deal that was offered to PlayStation. And let's be frank here. The only reason these deals exist is to appease regulators. It's a virtue signal. It's saying, hey, look, we're good. We're doing good things. We're going to bring this game to more platforms. Come on. If you can't see through that, true or not, but if you can't see through that bullshit, I don't know what to tell you. But on the other hand, I would still ask this question. What's stopping Activision from doing that now? What's stopping Activision from putting Call of Duty on the Nintendo Switch? They're a third party. They could easily do that if they really wanted to. Has anyone asked that question? They can do whatever they want. Develop for whatever platforms they want, and they don't. Why is that? Is it because the Switch is underpowered, and therefore when it comes over to Xbox, they'll have to develop for this underpowered machine and see what kind of experience that is, put all those time and resources into that? Maybe Activision doesn't have enough time and resources to do that, and the fatty deep pockets of Microsoft will allow that. I don't know. But I think the question's valid. There's nothing stopping them from doing it now. And if there is, what is it? It's not like it's under exclusivity with Xbox and PlayStation and PC. They can go to other platforms. Number 4, consumer-friendly Xbox Game Pass. I hate this one. And I've said it before. You guys know this. I hate the term consumer-friendly because in the context it's usually used, especially as it relates to Game Pass, means I just want free shit. So this deal's consumer friendly because, now you can get Call of Duty for free via Game Pass. That's why you want the deal to go through, because you want free shit. Why don't you just say it? I think it's fucking stupid, if I'm being honest. I can't stand that mentality that you just want free shit. You don't want to pay for games. And you know what? I understand some people gaming is an expensive hobby. I understand that. But I also think you have to understand the economic realities of making a video game, the costs, the time, the resources it takes, the high skill labor that is required to make these games. It's not something you can really just give away for free. But I digress there. Number 5, The opposition arguments are based on hypothetical apocalypse scenarios. And this is, I believe they're referring to PlayStation's position that basically if Call of Duty was taken away from PlayStation, it would do XYZ damage to the company. Because in some of the documents, they were talking about, Call of Duty players account for, redacted percent of PlayStation users, makes up redacted percent of their revenue, so on and so forth. You have to imagine it's probably a pretty significant chunk of change, significant chunk of players that play Call of Duty, because Call of Duty on consoles is primarily played on PlayStation. So it's a big deal. And while I guess it's valid that these are hypothetical situations, because let's be real, Call of Duty is not going anywhere, at least in the foreseeable future, because here's the thing. PlayStation needs Call of Duty just as much as Call of Duty needs PlayStation. The Call of Duty machine has like 5 or 6, 7 studios that make all the Call of Duty content, make Call of Duty games every year, support it, all of that stuff. That's very expensive. And if the majority of your player base is on one platform like PlayStation, I want to say it's like 70-30 last time I checked, then you can't just disregard 70% of your install base on consoles. That's a lot of money you're just leaving off the table. Likewise, PlayStation needs Call of Duty because it is a huge source of income, revenue, and player base for them, where they don't have to really do anything. It's free money, so to speak. So they need each other, and I don't think we can forget about that. So it is, I guess, a hypothetical situation, but I feel like it's being downplayed here to where you're saying that their argument is invalid because it is hypothetical. It's not invalid because these are actual valid points to where your competitor now controls that much of your revenue, of your player base. And at any point, no matter what they say to regulators, they can take that away, even if it means losing a lot of money. Microsoft and Xbox can afford to do that. So I don't think you can, I don't think it's right to just downplay these hypothetical situations, because there is validity to them, regardless of whatever they say. And I think I think it's valid to be skeptical of the shit that Phil Spencer and Xbox says, because he talks out of both sides of his mouth. I don't think anyone can really deny that. So I know we're now 20 or 23 minutes into the show, right at the top, and I've barely even done the intro, but I really wanted to touch on this because I was reading through this and I was like, I kind of want to respond to that. So that's kind of how I feel. I'll get off my soapbox now in terms of this deal. But again, I just don't understand this celebration of what's going on. Again, whatever happens with this deal, it is what it is. And at the end of the day, whatever happens will happen. But for me, besides some of the stuff I've already talked about in terms of the effects of Game Pass, the potential for this deal, the consolidation of the industry, all of that stuff, it just doesn't feel right. I don't feel like Microsoft has the best intentions. And again, sorry to say it, but when big corporations tend to do this, regardless, even if you as the consumer, it ends up getting a good deal, it's not always in your best interest for this consolidation and, to some degree, monopolization. It's not a full monopoly by any means, but it's getting there. So it just doesn't sit right with me. So anyways, again, this is a video game podcast. I'll get off my soapbox. We'll leave the Xbox stuff at the top here, move on to some other really interesting topics. But before we do, remember, the best way to support the show is to leave us nice reviews on the podcast platform that you're listening on. You can also find the show in video format over on YouTube and Rumble. You can check me out on Facebook, where I post links, clips, all that stuff, as well as hit me up on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. Also, I got an announcement to make. I made a clips channel for the podcast on YouTube. It is Gamecite Clips. You can search for that. It should pop up. I also tweeted it out, but I plan to kind of an experiment type thing to see if a newer channel maybe kind of fits into some of the algorithms with some of the clips and videos that I'll be posting. It's more of an experimentation game at this point, but I wanted to make a clips channel for the podcast, did that, and that's where you can find various clips from the show. So if you don't want to watch the show in full form, I'll do shorts as well as kind of longer form clips from the podcast. I'll upload it there. So be sure to check that out. Subscribe to that channel. It'd be greatly appreciated. And lastly, remember to catch new episodes of the show each and every week, Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, as you can see here, for this week's episode, I am drinking a wild cherry Pepsi. And it's delicious. I love Pepsi. I really do. And wild cherry is just so good. So that's what I'm enjoying this evening. It's almost gone, which I'm kind of bummed about, but it is what it is. So for this week's episode, I want to talk about PlayStation. I want to focus on PlayStation. I know we've been talking a lot about Xbox and all that stuff, but I want to focus on PlayStation and the kind of the future. A little speculation and a little talking about what I think they need to do. So I've put together a list of 5 things that I think PlayStation needs to do as we continue into the PS5 life cycle. And this idea kind of sparked because I've started seeing some rumors that there's going to be a PlayStation showcase, which we haven't had in a very long time, like an official full-on showcase from PlayStation around E3 time. That seems to be kind of the speculation going around that's supposed to talk about this next phase of PlayStation 5. And while I'll probably save my predictions for that for a future episode, so stay tuned for that, I wanted to focus on these 5 things that I really think PlayStation should do to not only generate goodwill, but I think would be awesome. And I think just kind of makes sense to a certain degree if you're a PlayStation fan or at least interested in this ecosystem. Additionally, there are a couple smaller news items I wanted to touch on as we typically do here on the show. First is there's an Elden Ring expansion that was announced, so we'll touch on that. An announcement regarding Hi-Fi Rush from Bethesda and a milestone that they achieved. And lastly, I want to talk about the Returnal PC sales, because Returnal, PlayStation 5 exclusive, recently launched on PC. How's it doing? We'll touch on that. But before we get into that, we got to talk about the games that we are playing. Of course, I want to hear from you, so let me know what games you've been playing down in the comments below or hit me up on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. And for me, I've continued my playthrough of Hogwarts Legacy. I mean, that's primarily what I've been playing. I think I just hit like 32 hours. And I got to be honest, I've been doing a lot of just like side stuff, like checkboxy. There's these like Merlin trials that you can do. There's collectibles you can find all over. And I've just kind of been doing a lot of that checkbox stuff. I've kind of been thinking about like, do I want to go for the platinum? And there's just so many things to do and collect in this game. I don't know if I'm actually going to do it because I think it would take me quite a while. But I'm still spending my time with it. I'm going to get as many trophies as I can that I find reasonable before I put this game down and beat it. But I am still enjoying it. I still think it's really fun. I just started continuing the story a little bit too, actually, before I hopped on this podcast. So that's been fun. It's great. One thing I gotta say though that's bugging me about this game, and it's a mild gripe, but as I'm going around looking for collectibles, it really bothers me. And that is like anytime you go into like a house, your character slows down to like this very slow walk. And you can kind of run, but you can tell it's held back. So your character movement is just so slow when you're in a house. And for me, when I'm trying to go in and just look around real quick to see if I see a collectible or the item that I'm looking for, I don't want my character to slow down. I want to come in, I want to look around real quick, and I want to get out. It is so annoying. I don't know why it does this. It's really annoying. I don't understand its purpose. It makes no sense to me, but that's one thing that's really been bugging me about this game. as I've been kind of doing the checkbox activities. One of the other things I forgot to mention over the last, since I've started playing this game is the awesome features with the DualSense controller, because I'm playing on the PlayStation 5 and it's got some great functionality here. Obviously the triggers when you're kind of flying around and using spells and stuff like that, you can kind of feel some of the resistance and you get that. And actually the lights on the edge of the touchpad, like if you use like your light your wand, it'll kind of glow, or you'll see various colors as you're doing various activities, which is really, really cool. And then you can actually use the touchpad on the menu to kind of scroll around. So just some really cool features. It's a nice touch for the PS5 version on the DualSense controller. And gosh, the DualSense is such a fantastic controller. It really is. It's so awesome. So shout out to that game. I'm going to continue playing it, and we'll get through this game eventually, but I'm enjoying my time with it. So kind of just taking my time, even though I've got so many other games I want to play, but it's really fun. Additionally, I also started a game called Light Brigade on the PSVR 2. I've probably played this game for less than an hour and a half. As I mentioned last week, I got a little motion sickness when I first jumped into the PSVR 2. It's gotten a little bit better. I've tried to limit my playthroughs to 15, 30 minutes, kind of just hop in, do a little bit. And let me pull up a description for how I would describe the Light Brigade. Because it's a really interesting game. So let me pull it up here on the PS Store. No, that's not a good example. So here's a description. It's a tactical roguelike shooter with realistic gunplay and immersive light magic. Ascend the ranks of the Light Brigade as you... Hopefully this doesn't play through. As you journey through shattered memories to return light to the darkness. So it is a roguelike shooter, and it's pretty crazy in the sense that, like, you start off with an M1 Garand. I'm pretty sure that's the gun. And you literally get clips that you have like a utility belt below you, and you get clips and you're like putting them in your belt. And then you pull your rifle from your back and you have to pull out a clip, put it in the gun, cock the gun, and then you can hold it and shoot. And when you run out of ammo, you can press the X button to drop the clip. You have to get another clip, put it in, reload it. And it's all these little things that you take for granted, like when you're playing a shooter, like with a controller, because it all does that stuff automatically. So it makes it really difficult. This game is really, really hard. And I'm using the teleporting because I don't want to get, uber motion sickness by actually using movement. And it works out, I think, pretty well. But the problem is something like the enemies see you from so far away that once they see you, they'll start shooting you. And it's not like you can kind of just, dodge and get out of the way. Some of their spells and stuff, when they shoot them at you, like, are homing towards you. And sometimes the aiming's a little off, but it's difficult. You kind of have to pick them off pick your enemies off at a distance, and try to sneak up on them and just really kind of be aware of your surroundings and kind of take things slow as you kind of go through each of the stages. And in a typical roguelike fashion, I think I've made it to stage 3. It's as farthest I've gotten, and it's really cool because you earn experience, you can level up your character. There's different unlocks, like permanent unlocks that you can get as you progress, and so you're progressing through each run to try to get farther and farther. So a lot of those standard roguelike elements. And I actually looked up a tips video I didn't even realize there's like a gun shop to where you can use some of the currency to buy different weapons. So I need to check that out, but it's pretty cool. And I'm just, one of the things I've been so impressed with the PSVR 2 and the 2 games really I've tried is just the realism in firing your weapons, and the fact that you like have to cock them, and the fact that I have to grab a clip and put it in, and you can just keep cocking it back and forth, and your bullets are flying out just like a real firearm, and it's crazy. It's really, really cool. So I plan on playing that. I'll play it a little bit more just to see how far I can get. I have a feeling I probably will never reach a point where I beat this game because it is genuinely difficult. And also I want to jump into the Horizon game, Horizon Call of the Mountain, because I know that's a game I can actually play from start to finish, presumably, hopefully in kind of maybe 30-minute chunks so I don't get motion sickness, and kind of build up a tolerance there. Also, I really want to get Moss Books 1 and 2 for those games. I've talked a little bit about Moss before. I've heard so many good things about it. I actually have Moss 1 for PSVR, but I never got around to playing it. And so I want to play these games, not only because they're I've heard they're really good games, but also it's another game where like I can probably get from start to finish in a relatively short amount of time. So that's something that's been on my radar too. And there's, so many other games in my backlog that I want to play, but not enough time in the world. So that's what I've been playing. So now let's jump into a couple of those news items. First, let's start with that Elden Ring expansion. So From Software, they officially announced the upcoming DLC expansion for Elden Ring, and it's titled Shadow of the Erd Tree. And they did this through, I think it was a tweet, and then a bunch of, news outlets picked it up. And the developers basically said it's officially in development and they have no release date. So basically just confirmed that it existed, and that's it. And then I think they posted one screenshot, and the image that they shared, obviously on the podcast, I'm just going to describe it for you, but it basically shows this big tree in the distance. And I don't know if that's the main tree from the game. I haven't beat it, so I don't know any context, but it shows this big tree in the distance. It doesn't have the yellow glow like the normal tree in the game. If you've played Elden Ring, you know what I'm talking about. And then that's in the distance. It's got this long blonde-haired character who's riding like this horse-looking creature going towards the tree. And then in this field that they're in, there's tons of these ghostly looking people that are carrying like almost cross-looking things, but they're ghosts in this field as this person is venturing through it. Very ominous, very interesting. Don't know what it means, but I think this is awesome. Very, very awesome. And it just reminds me I need to get back to this game, give it another go and get through it, because this DLC is no doubt, there's going to be a lot of hype for this. No doubt it's going to be good. I'm curious what the price will be. I imagine I can't remember what the DLC prices are for some of the other like Dark Souls expansions. But I would think, depending on the size of the DLC, $20 to $30 might be reasonable. So we'll see. Now, I saw someone tweet something about this DLC that I thought was really interesting. Let me pull it up. Again, I don't have it pulled up, but let me pull it up here. And I think it's kind of a point of contention with some folks. But they said, here it is, Elden Ring should have a pause button. And this article, I think they reference this article where it says Elden Ring DLC needs to add a pause button. And he goes on to say, this isn't an add an easy mode for accessibility bullshit thing. It's a basic convenience. I've had people knock on my door while I'm in the middle of fighting a dragon. There's no reason not to have one. And this is interesting, because anytime with all the Dark Souls games, especially Elden Ring, it's the accessibility is brought up, right? There's this obsession over, accessibility and checkboxing and virtue signaling and all that stuff. But regardless of that, I think this is kind of a valid point. I would actually like to see this, because when I was playing Elden Ring, now that, my gaming time can easily be interrupted. I'm a dad, and if my son needs something, he needs something, right? Or just being able to, like this guy says, someone's at the door. or maybe you want to pause for a second and you want to grab a snack or a beverage or whatever. I think it just makes sense. Like I think it would be such a nice feature. And as I was playing Elden Ring, one of the things I noticed is that I usually just put my PS5 in rest mode. So when I come back, I can immediately jump back into the game. With Elden Ring, because of its online connectivity, I always have to re-log in, and you can't really do that, which is a separate gripe. But along like the pause button, I think would be so awesome. Now, maybe that's not possible because of the online connectivity and all that stuff, but I don't know. I feel like it makes sense, and I feel like it's such a basic convenience factor that just being able to pause it, either take a breather or do whatever you got to do. Sometimes life gets in the way, and not all of us have dedicated windows of time that we can be completely uninterrupted to dedicate to gaming. So I kind of like it. I love that idea. I don't think it's going to happen, but I really love that idea. And I kind of wanted to bring it up just because I'm curious what you think about it, but I'm on board. So From Software, I know you're not listening to this podcast, but can we get a pause button? Maybe, something that'd be nice. Moving on to this next news story about Hi-Fi Rush. So Bethesda recently tweeted out that Tango Gameworks' critically successful game Hi-Fi Rush has hit 2 million players on both Xbox and PC. And they have a tweet here specifically. And they said 2 million players have moved to the beat of Hi-Fi Rush. Keep on rocking, rock stars. And they got this actually pretty cool picture of the main character. It says, thank you for 2 million players. And directly from Bethesda. So pretty cool milestone. Shout out to Tango Gameworks and this Hi-Fi Rush game. It seems like this game has had some critical success. A lot of people have been talking about it. I think quite a few people are saying it's an early game of the year contender. It's certainly a game that's on the top, like that's probably the top of my backlog. I mean, I'm thinking about, I've got some time. If I can get through Hogwarts Legacy, then I can dive into that game because it's not terribly long, and I can play that before Resident Evil 4 comes out. So it's on my radar, and I definitely want to play it to see if it's a game I'm going to like and kind of what the hype's all about. And I think it's indicative that whatever expectations they had for this game, I would assume they exceeded those expectations, because usually when developers or publishers kind of tweet out these milestones, that means that they've reached some level of success that they're proud of. However, I was kind of thinking about this, and I was thinking 2 million players, like that's a lot of players, right? It's not sales. We know that. It's just players. But then how many Game Pass subscribers are there? I want to say like 25, 27 million. Let's just say it's 25 million. I can't remember the exact number, but it's around, I want to say around 25, 27 million. So we have 25 million Game Pass subscribers, all have access to this game for free, and only, I think that's about 8%, if we're doing 25 million, played this game or downloaded it. That seems low to me based on those numbers, right? And then we also know, because there was a lot of information, a lot of articles being posted, that Hi-Fi Rush was outselling Forspoken. And that was this huge narrative when you talk about sales numbers and all this stuff. So we know that those 2 million players in part are coming from people buying the game over on Steam on the PC platform, not via Game Pass. So that means that it's even less than 8% of all Game Pass subscribers have downloaded and tried this game. I think that's kind of crazy. To me, that seems low. Now, again, Bethesda, I'm sure whatever expectations they had for this game have passed if they're coming out saying, hey, we've reached this milestone, but it just seems low to me. Given your subscriber base, I mean, not even 10% of people downloaded this game, when they all have access to it. I don't know. Something just seems off about that. Again, I'm happy for them. I like Tango Gameworks. I'm a Tango Gameworks fan now. I've been a Tango Gameworks fan, but I'm even more on board after playing Ghostwire Tokyo. I love the Evil Within 1 and 2. I really want them to do another Evil Within, and Ghostwire Tokyo blew me away last year when I played that. I went in with very low expectations and walked away really enjoying that game way more than I thought I would. And I really think that's kind of an underrated game at this point. It's snuck under a lot of people's radar. And they seem to have another banger with Hi-Fi Rush. So, I like this studio. I want to see them succeed. I just think it's weird when you put it in the context of how many Game Pass subscribers there are and the fact that this game is touted as this like golden, amazing game, game of the year contender that's available for free to all those people, but only, less than 8% of them actually took advantage of playing that game and trying it out. I just find that interesting. Now, I did try to find sales numbers because, again, sales are king, right? Just because you had 2 million players, that doesn't tell us how much money you made on this game. And at the end of the day, even if you are backed by Microsoft in those deep pockets, money is king. And I wasn't able to find any sales numbers. Kind of unsurprising. Again, Xbox doesn't talk about sales anymore. So we kind of got that. But I did come across this Reddit article. And I'm not going to go into detail about it. But basically, this person put a post on here because, remember, there was a lot of news articles and this big narrative that Hi-Fi Rush was outselling Forspoken. And this person comes in and says Forspoken actually outsold and outperformed Hi-Fi Rush on Steam by over twice as much in its first week. And it basically says there's been a lot of misinformation going around surrounding Forspoken and Hi-Fi Rush's Steam performance in their first week sales. And long story short, I think the major points is that he says it's like basically that the sales numbers in the first week sales don't include pre-orders. And we know Hi-Fi Rush wasn't available for pre-order. Forspoken was high on the charts for pre-order. So that's not included. And then he talks about player counts to where actually player counts were higher for Forspoken than Hi-Fi Rush. And it goes into detail on here. And I just find that really interesting. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, again, we don't have official sales numbers. This could just be a bunch of made up shit, though he has a lot of data in here to back it up. It is a pretty long post. Kind of makes you wonder, like, all this propagandizing of Hi-Fi Rush, like, are some folks like that thirsty over on the Xbox side to just have a win? I don't know. It just seems really, really weird. And I'm like super skeptical of all of this stuff now. But I think the long story short is congrats to Tango Gameworks. Seems like you guys hit a great milestone that you're super proud of. I really want to try Hi-Fi Rush. I wish we had more sales information. I wish we understood how much money this game made. But I imagine that's not newsworthy enough to talk about, which is why we don't have it. So really, really interesting. Wanted to point that out. Because it's just, again, 2 million in the context of all the Game Pass subscribers just doesn't seem like a lot to me. But either way. And lastly, let's talk about Returnal and its PC sales numbers. So over at Push Square, one of my favorite websites, they have an article titled Returnal is Sony's second most unpopular PC game at launch. So it ain't performing well over on the PC space. And the long story short of it is that basically this game pulled in a peak player count of 6,691, making it the second most unpopular title from PlayStation behind the launch of Sackboy: A Big Adventure. And they list some of the PC ports that have happened from PlayStation over the recent recent couple years. So God of War which has been out for 13 months. Had the highest concurrent number of players at 73,209. Marvel Spider-Man Remastered 6 months ago was at 66. When it launched 6 months ago, peaked at 66,436. Horizon Zero Dawn, which launched 3 years ago, peaked at 56,557. Days Gone, which was 2 years ago, peaked at 27,450. Miles Morales, which was 3 months ago, 13,539. Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection, which was 4 months ago, peaked at 10,851. Then you had Returnal, and then Sackboy: A Big Adventure, which was 4 months ago, peaked at 610. That is bad. No love for Sackboy, huh? I actually have that game, and I started it, and it's pretty cool. It just didn't really hold my attention, so I guess I can understand it. But man, that's not good news for Returnal. And I'm bummed to hear this because I'm a Returnal fan. I loved that game a lot. It really, really resonated with me. So I'm biased here. But I'm curious, like, what are the actual sales numbers? Because if you recall, PlayStation this year has really big goals and forecast numbers for their PC sales division of games. And I think that's in part, I think probably they expected this game. I think in part was Uncharted coming over. And then, of course, I think what will be one of the bigger ones is The Last of Us Part 1, which I think comes out at the end of this month in March. And after the success of the Last of Us show on HBO, I imagine that game is going to do very well when it launches on PC. So, but God only knows what the actual Returnal PC sales numbers are. It can't be that good, which is kind of a bummer. We'll probably never know them because Sony doesn't really come forth with sales numbers that are bad. Excuse me. So that is what it is. But I'm curious as to why. And my theory in part is this. I think this is a contributing factor because this game required very high specs on the PC. I'm not going to pretend to understand it, but I know it had egregious spec requirements over on the PC space. And I think that's in part due to the speeds of the PS5's SSD, to where a lot of computers, even modern computers, don't necessarily have the same speeds in the SSD space. So they have to get that power elsewhere. It's kind of how I understand it. Again, I'm not super technical savvy on this stuff, but I'm wondering if that's been a barrier for a lot of people. Because I have to imagine the PCs that are required to run this game are probably pretty expensive, require some pretty expensive components, and that's probably only a small percentage of actual PC owners. So I'm thinking that's a contributing factor, not everything, because even when this game came out on PlayStation 5, I think a lot of people were very resistant to it and weren't super interested in it. But I'm just so interested in it. And I find the lack of interest around this game just to be such a bummer. Like, people really write this game off. And you don't know you're missing out, man. I think this game is genuinely a great game. It's so much fun. I think it's addicting and so fluid, very kinetic, and just a blast to play through. I love the atmosphere. I love the shooting. I love the challenge of it, the difficulty. Oh man. And then I think it's the fourth boss battle was just epic. Like, that's my favorite boss battle in that game. It was so good. Oh man, I loved it. And it actually, when you talk about critical reception, it's got pretty good critical reception. Over on OpenCritic, it has an 86 average score and a 90% critic recommendation, which I'd say is pretty good. And then Metacritic shows an 86 critic score and then a 7.3 user score, a little bit lower on the user score, but I think that's in part due, because I remember when this game came out, a lot of people were complaining about the difficulty, the length of the runs, and then I think they had some save and performance issues when it launched as well, which probably led to some of those lower scores. But man, this game is awesome, and I really think people need to give it a try. I understand it's not necessarily going to resonate with everyone, but it's so fun. It's so good. And like once you get it and kind of start to understand the game's mechanics, and the arcade nature of it, it's a blast. And I've been thinking about this game a lot, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, because I still want to get that dang platinum. It's just, I'm so close. Like, I think I have like 2 more trophies left and a couple of, and it's just from collecting those stupid recorders that are, of course, RNG based. But man, it's just right there. I kind of want to go back and play it. And I actually never did play that DLC update that they provided, the Ascension Tower one or whatever that was. So I kind of want to get back to it. But if you've never tried Returnal, give it a go, man. I'm pretty sure you can get this game for cheap now on the PlayStation 5. And you're gonna struggle. It's gonna be frustrating probably, but it's such a good game that it's worth it, you know? So now let's get into the main topic now, just about an hour into the show. And I'm going to share 5 things that I think PlayStation needs to do. And these 5 things, I think, help alleviate some perceptions around the PlayStation brand. Because I think there's been a lot of concern around PlayStation, some of the decisions that they're making, and some of it rightfully so. And I think this would help. These things would help alleviate some of that concern. I think some of these would be generate a lot of good customer goodwill and could probably make you some money too. So let's dig into it, shall we? And so just to preface too, this list isn't necessarily in any particular order. Though I think this first one probably should be near or at the top of their list, because I think it's imperative that they do it, especially given the Activision Blizzard deal and the status of that. So let's jump into it. Number 1, PlayStation needs an FPS game. They need a first-person shooter. I think it's just as simple as that. They have to have a first-person shooter. Again, if you look across the aisle, and I'm going to look this up because I can't remember it all off the top of my head. But if we look at over at Xbox and all of the first-person like IPs that they own, they're like the king of first-person shooters over there. And if the Activision Blizzard deal goes through, they are certainly going to be the king of first-person shooters. I mean, they have currently right now, pre-Activision, they've got, obviously they have Doom, they have Halo, which are really big ones. They've got Wolfenstein in Machine Games. Let's see. They, some of the Bethesda games, which are first person, not necessarily first person shooters, but like some of the Fallout games, Elder Scrolls, those are in the first person. And I know there's more here. Let me click here. Let's go here. Okay, hold on. You know what? Anyways, Xbox has a lot of first-person shooters, and they are predominant in that space. And I think will only maintain predominance if this Activision deal goes through. So PlayStation has a noticeable gap. They don't really have any first-person shooters anymore. And I think part of that is because they've become so complacent and reliant on Call of Duty as just this easy money-making machine for them. And you can't necessarily blame them, but they used to have the likes of like Resistance, used to have Killzone, SOCOM, and those IPs have kind of been abandoned. And it's kind of a bummer in that regard. And I think when you look at the first party lineup of games, you kind of just see a gap like, okay, we're getting a lot of third person narrative action adventures. That's the main criticism. Why not a first person shooter? And again, if this Activision Blizzard deal goes through, you'll still have Call of Duty for X period. But I think it becomes even more imperative that you have your own in-house first-person shooter. It's not going to overtake Call of Duty, but it gives your audience an alternative. Because if something does happen, it gives you a fallback to provide your audience with something similar to a certain degree that they know and love. Again, it's not going to be the size of Call of Duty. It's not going to compete with all Call of Duty. No one really can. But I think it's important, and I think a lot of people want that. I think what they should do specifically is use SOCOM, because I don't even know what happened to SOCOM and like why that franchise just disappeared for all intents and purposes. I mean, I think you could make a game like Rainbow Six Siege in SOCOM, and I think it could be very successful. I would love that idea. Kind of this, a military shooter. You could do it in first person or first and third person if you really wanted to. And give it some competitive multiplayer in there, maybe do a solid campaign. I think you could put together a great package with SOCOM to appease and fill this first person shooter gap. I think that would be freaking awesome. So PlayStation needs a first person shooter. However that comes, it's got to happen. And I think they've got, with some of their second and third party relationships, I believe there's 1 or 2 live service first person shooter games in the works. So I think we're eventually going to get some exclusive FPS games, but just kind of thought of this. They have Bungie now. Like, again, Bungie's going to continue to work on Destiny. Bungie's their own vertical, but you have that talent, and you could draw from that talent to really help your first party studios put together an excellent first person shooter. It just makes sense. Number 2, I think PlayStation needs to incorporate a mix of new IP in their lineup of games. As I previously mentioned, one of the biggest criticisms around PlayStation is that all their this generation is just full of sequels and remakes. That's what they're doing. And I think that's fair to a certain degree, because we've got The Last of Us Part 1, there's rumored of another Horizon, Dark Souls, etc. And I look back at kind of the late PS3, PS4 era, and there was a ton of new IP that was mixed in. And and that was a really golden period. And I think they need to continue that to add a little bit of diversification to their lineup of games. And I think that would appeal to a lot of people. I understand new IPs can be risky. They may not land. But Sony's been pretty good at it for the most part. Just to name a few that happened in the late PS3, PS4 era, in terms of new IPs coming out exclusive to PlayStation, Days Gone, which that game certainly has its problems, and I think is certainly deserving of a sequel. And it's unfortunate we're never going to get one, but that game does have some really cool moments to it. It's got some great kind of skeleton that I think if they were given time for another sequel would be awesome. But Days Gone, we had Ghost of Tsushima, which is a fantastic game. Detroit Become Human, which is a brand new IP. At the time, Persona 5, which was exclusive to PlayStation. Spider-Man, of course. Horizon Zero Dawn, of course. Death Stranding from Kojima. Neo 1 and 2. Those games are exclusive to PlayStation. And Until Dawn, that's another one. That game, man, that game is so good. And so we had that ton of new IPs, but then we also had sequels, which we're getting now and are going to continue to get. But we had, remember Knack 2? You know what? I love Knack. We need another Knack game. Come on, Sony, make it happen. Give us another Knack. Knack 3, please. I know I'm probably the only one who's going to buy it, but that's what I want. But we also had, sequel to The Last of Us. Killzone Shadowfall was a sequel. Uncharted 4. Then we had the spinoff of Lost Legacy, Infamous Second Son. So you had your mix of sequels in there as well. But then they also focused on smaller games. So they focused, games like Resogun. They had games like Concrete Genie, which came from first party. I never played that game, but it did look kind of neat. Dreams, which they just, quite frankly, need to abandon. Astrobot Rescue Mission. Moss, Book 1. on the PSVR. So they had this focus on kind of smaller and some mini titles mixed into this portfolio and lineup that was exclusive to PlayStation, which I think worked really well, because then you could look at their entire lineup of first party, really not only first party, but their lineup of exclusive games, and say, okay, we've got some new IPs sprinkled in, we got some sequels, remakes, remasters, and then we got some focus on some really good smaller indie titles, all making up this portfolio of really awesome games. Whereas in the PS5 generation, we have gotten some new IPs, Returnal being one of them. We've got some sequels like Ratchet and Clank, Miles Morales, remakes, obviously Last of Us Part 1, Demon's Souls. So we're getting that, but I feel like we need more of that, because we know on the horizon, we're going to get Ghost of Tsushima 2, Spider-Man 2, we've got the sequel to Horizon, Death Stranding 2. Like, we know we're getting the sequels. We know we're getting some more remakes and remasters. I think they need to continue to introduce those new IPs because Sony's been pretty good about that, and I think it worked out really well for them. Number 3, and this one is, let's be honest, it's for me. This is a me pick because I'm a big fan of it. Bloodborne 2. Make it happen. You got to make it happen, PlayStation. Bloodborne 2. The first Bloodborne is one of the best, if not the best, PlayStation 4 game to have come out. It is wildly popular. It helped introduce the Soulsborne games to a lot of people in the same way that Elden Ring has now even broadened that scope to even more people. And it's so good. The Gothic Victorian setting is fantastic. The fluid, faster movement compared to Dark Souls is so good. The bosses were amazing. It's just truly a special game. And it's one of my favorite games of all time. I love and adore that game. I actually have this really unique PlayStation poster, like specifically from PlayStation Direct. It's 2 of 300 that's from Bloodborne. In my room, it's freaking awesome, and it's like one of my favorite gaming like memorabilia items ever. So Bloodborne 2, man, just, I don't think it's ever going to happen with From Software. Obviously, with the success of Elden Ring, I think they're going to do Elden Ring, they're going to do Armored Core. I don't know that they're going to ever work with From Software again to make a Bloodborne 2, but they own the IP, and what is it? Blue Point did a pretty good job with Demon's Souls, so maybe they got some chops to make it happen. It would really be weird if it wasn't a From Software game, but you got to make it happen. Or at the very least, I would accept a Bloodborne port to PS5. Bring that game up to PS5. Upper res, higher resolution, and at minimum, a locked 60 FPS. It's wild to me that they've never done a patch for Bloodborne on the PS5 to do a 60 FPS patch. Games like Horizon did that, which runs very, very well, but nothing for Bloodborne. There's like no love for Bloodborne, and I don't understand it, because people are like begging for this online. And in conjunction with that, if you are going to bring it to PS5, put it on PC as well. I think it would sell like hotcakes, and because the Souls community on PC is huge, and I think this is like the one game that they don't have that they would love to get into, speedrunning, all that stuff over on PC. I think it would sell a ton. So if you can't give us Bloodborne 2, at least give us Bloodborne 1 remastered for the PS5 and bring it to PC. Number 4, you need to bring your biggest IPs from PlayStation 3 to PS5 as collections. Because I know they offer through their subscription service with, PlayStation Premium, I think is what it is, PS Plus Premium, the ability to play PS3 games, but you have to stream them. And I haven't done it personally, but I've heard it's not necessarily the best experience depending on the type of game that you're playing. You can't play them natively. And there are a lot of great games on the PS3 that are now just kind of abandoned, such as The Infamous 1, Infamous 2, the Resistance trilogy, Killzone 2, Killzone 3, really the Killzone trilogy. Sly Cooper, Jack and Daxter, I think, and Ratchet, some of those older Ratchet and Clank games. So like there's a plethora of great games that I think they could do is like remaster collections to bring them over to the PS5, so that way people can play them, still enjoy them, and give your IPs a little bit of life as they've been stagnant for so long. I think it's good for game preservation. I think it's good for, generate a little goodwill, make a little money, probably not that much effort, I would imagine. I think it's a win-win. I don't understand why they don't do this. Like I think about, like at the very least, like give us a Resistance trilogy and then the two Infamous games. Port those over to the PS5, sell them. I genuinely think lots of people would buy them, especially the Resistance trilogy. We talk about FPS shooters. I mean, that's an easy win to get some first-person shooters over on your platform. Just saying. I think you need to make it happen. I don't know that they're ever going to solve the PS3 backwards compatibility issue, though. That's probably another thing, maybe a number 6 on here, to where they need to fix that and offer that. So at the very least, it allows you to take some of the biggest titles that are just locked away on the PS3 and get them on modern platforms so people can still play them and enjoy them. And finally, number 5. I think they need to consistently deliver classic titles to their, I think it's a PlayStation Plus premium service, and offer them a la carte. I know they do some of this, but I think that consistency needs to be the biggest point here, because each month they bring new titles to the PS Plus service, but they haven't, there's been like a game or two here and there, and they're not always that great. It's hit and miss. I think they need to be more consistent about this, especially with the plethora of backlog that PlayStation has over the years. I mean, just to go through some of the titles, and some of these aren't first party, so I'm sure maybe there's some licensing issues with some of these, but they're iconic PlayStation games. And I feel like you could make a deal here to get these on your service, especially if you can get some of these, other more modern games on your service. Why can't you do it with some of the other ones? Maybe I'm being a little naive here, but Castlevania Symphony of the Night, work with Konami on that one. Metal Gear Solid, the original one, again, work with Konami. The Tomb Raiders 1, 2, and 3, those are classic, iconic PlayStation games, which I think you'd have to work with Embracer Group, but I think they sold Tomb Raider. Or maybe the movie rights to Tomb Raider to Amazon or something like that. I don't know what's going on with Tomb Raider, but Tomb Raiders 1, 2, and 3 are classic. Final Fantasy Tactics is a good one. Maybe Square Enix could still work with you on that. Same with Vagrant Story. Obviously, Ratchet and Clank, the original ones. Gran Turismo games. Manhunt on PS2. The old God of War games from PS2. The Wipeout games over the years. Seems like a no-brainer. The original Killzone. The Resistance game on PSP. I think there was a Killzone game on PSP as well. And then add in Vita, because there's some great titles on PlayStation Vita that should be ported over, such as Uncharted Golden Abyss, Killzone Mercenary. I think there was a Sly Cooper collection and some Sly Cooper games. Freedom Wars, I know, was pretty big. There was also a Resistance game on the Vita. I think an FPS called Unit 13. So lots of Vita games I think you can choose from. Some of them have already been like remastered and brought over to the PS4 generation. But certainly a lot of opportunity, I think, within PlayStation's history and backlog to consistently deliver every month a good title to the PlayStation Plus service, and then offer them a la carte. Sell them a la carte. I understand that maybe one of the reasons that they don't do this more is because they want to drive people toward the subscription service, because getting people engaged in a subscription service over the long term is more beneficial than a one-time purchase. I can understand that. But at the same time, I think there's a benefit in offering your customers the ability to say, like, if someone can't subscribe to the service, but you can still buy the game, you got options here. You can either subscribe, get access to multiple of them, this entire library, or you can pick and choose which games you want to play and purchase and then have forever. I just think that's a win for a consumer. I think it's a win for PlayStation. It's not going to be a huge money-making machine by any means, but I'm certainly going to make some money there. And it can't be that much effort, I would think, to put some of these games on your service. So I really feel like that's a big gap for them. And they need to kind of get up to snuff on that one a little bit. So there you have it. Those are 5 things I think PlayStation needs to do for the PlayStation 5 and kind of moving along in this ecosystem. I didn't really touch on PSVR 2. It's still pretty new. And I think we're going to dedicate an episode as we get closer to summertime to predict what could be next and on the horizon from PlayStation. I think we'll also probably do this for Xbox as well, maybe even Nintendo, and just dedicate a few episodes to it. Should be a lot of fun. So, of course, let me know what you guys think about my list. Did I miss anything? What do you think PlayStation needs to do? Let me know down in the comments below or right into the show. I'd love to hear from you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. A little bit lengthy, but lots to talk about, I feel like. And I know I got on my soapbox a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but hey, it's going to happen. It's that's what the podcast is here for. So, hope you guys have a great week out there. Hope you guys get to play lots of video games. As always, I really do appreciate your love, kindness, and support. And if you really do want to support the show, I think the best way you can do that is either to leave us nice reviews on the podcast platform or share it with your friends. Get the word out there. Spread the news. The good word of the show. It's always very much appreciated. And until next week, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.